In this podcast, two Gen Xers are taking a trip down memory lane, revisiting and reflecting on the cinema of the 1980s. We'll look at the hits and the flops, the studio blockbusters and art house indies, the critically acclaimed, and the universally reviled. The series is hosted by me, Lisa Molinelli, a writer and librarian, and features Dustin Morrow, a filmmaker, author, and professor of film. So pull on your legwarmers, crank up your boombox, and hop in the DeLorean. It's time for the Long Rewind. Welcome to the Long Rewind. I'm your host, Lisa, and with me as always is Dustin.
Hello.
And we're here to discuss the films of the first half of 1987. How's it going, Dustin?
Good. It's a big year.
It is a big year.
I mean, I was looking at the first half of 87 and thinking like this was more of a down year, or like starting to think like, oh, we're on the downward
slant
trend
here.
from the peak of what I think was 84.
Yeah.
And then I got to the back half of 87 and I was like, oh no, like this is like, I could make a top 25 like favorite movies ever, and they could all be from the back half of 87. There's so many good movies this year.
It's quite packed, so strap in, everybody. It's gonna be a ride.
Especially for the next episode after this
second
one.
episode
Will be supersized probably.
Right, more than likely.
All right, let's give a little context to what was going on in the world in 1987.
All right, let's get to the news. On October 19th, a day known as Black Monday, global stock markets experienced a severe crash. I remember this, too. The Dow Jones Industrial Average in the United States dropped more than 22% in a single day, causing a significant financial crisis. Do you remember this?
Vaguely, yeah. People were like throwing themselves off of buildings.
Were they really
Wall
Street.
That,
or was that more just something people were talking about?
No, I think it was a real
thing.
Yeah. I think it was.
I know it was back in the Depression, for instance, but I
think there were some suicides around this one as well.
I wouldn't be surprised. I just remember it maybe because I lived so close to New York City. Maybe it was just, I don't know, it was very much in the news for everybody, I'm sure. On December 8th, the United States and the Soviet Union signed the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces INF Treaty, which aimed to eliminate all land-based ballistic and cruise missiles with intermediate ranges. Yeah,
this was part of the thawing of the Cold War that started to happen in this era.
Yeah, it
fall of the Berlin Wall. It was all these sort of like
89.
These,
I think,
all these big events that symbolized sort of key moments in thawing the Cold War.
The Cold War.
And to the degree that this is a podcast about movies, the Russia was sort of the big enemy in 80s action movies. And then at a certain point it became terrorists, right? That was a big thing too. But like it was a really big deal in the 80s, this idea of Russia being our enemy. And of course we know things have kind of come full circle.
Yeah, weird. Russia and the Cold War were big in movies, just in general. And also Wall Street, for that matter, going back to a couple of, and we'll talk about that later too, I'm sure. But also, the Iran-Contra scandal unfolded throughout 1987. It involved covert arms sales to Iran and the illegal diversion of funds to support Contra rebels in Nicaragua, which violated U.S. laws and policies. And of course, this was something I knew nothing about in 1987, and I still can't claim to know a lot about it.
It was on TV a lot,
it was
though. I remember, and I could name all the key players.
Oliver North,
but
right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Fawn Hall, and there were.
Yeah.
But as a kid, it wasn't something that, like, as a kid growing up in the middle of rural Illinois, was really on my radar. But I was aware of it because it was always preempting like TV shows that I liked.
Yeah, well, absolutely. That's the thing. Again, I was like 8 going on 9, 8 or 9, depending on the time of year it was. Mm-hmm. And I remember it too. It was all over the place. I knew the names, and what would I have known about any of that at the age of like 8 or 9?
Yeah. So there was some big pop culture news this year. So why don't you take us through some of the pop culture?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, the animated television series The Simpsons made its debut on December 17th. That's a huge watershed moment. It has since become one of the longest running and most successful TV shows in history. Pretty much everybody knows The Simpsons throughout many generations at this point.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling to think that show is still going and still producing new episodes.
Yeah. In August, Michael Jackson released his highly anticipated album, Bad. It included hit singles like The Way You Make Me Feel, Man in the Mirror, and of course, the title track, Bad.
Did you own Bad?
I didn't. No, I didn't own a lot. I mean, again, I was 8 or 9. I just didn't own a whole lot of stuff. Yeah, I didn't have that album.
I had it.
Nice.
I remember
a lot of people did.
I remember, in fact, that it was. It's my first memory. Maybe it was the first time they did this. I don't know, that they released the video as like a half-hour TV special. Like that was the big premiere.
Yeah.
And I didn't know this at the time because there was no way to know such things. There was no IMDb or anything. But Scorsese directed the Bad video.
He did.
I'm not sure I would have necessarily. Maybe I did. Maybe I knew who Scorsese was by that point. I was an early film nerd.
Yeah,
for sure.
I bet you did. I bet you knew. Yeah.
But I remember taping the special on VHS and watching it a few times. Yeah, they did it again with like black and white a few years later.
Oh yeah, I remember that being a big deal too in the 90s. Or was that 89?
Yeah, it might have been very early 90s.
Yeah, I think that's right.
It was Macaulay Culkin was in it. George Wendt, Norm from Cheers was in it.
Were they?
Yeah, and it was the only I taped that too, and I remember. The big deal about having that tape, this was pre-internet, of course, was that it was the only time they showed that video in its entirety, like the full 20-minute version, because he in the second half of that video is just him dancing on this street, and he like grabs his crotch a bunch of times and does all these sort of suggestive moves, and it was like the network was flooded with calls and people were complaining.
Yeah.
And it's hilarious to think of now in the wake of like, my God, like Lady Gaga and Britney Spears and everything that's come since that's been so sort of suggestive and explicit. Sure. But at the time, it was a huge deal, like how explicit that was. And they never showed, like MTV never showed the full video. It was just, you couldn't see it anywhere again. But I had it on tape, I remember.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Huh. The thing I mostly remember about Black or White was the morph.
Yeah, it was like it was one of, if not the first, kind of like big use of that morphing technology, which got wildly overused in the 90s.
It sure did.
Yeah.
Well, moving on with 87, Guns N' Roses released their debut studio album, Appetite for Destruction, in July. The album featured hits like Welcome to the Jungle, Sweet Child of Mine, and Paradise City. Went on to become one of the best-selling albums of all time, and I think
I was not into hair metal as a little kid.
No.
But even I had this album.
Wow.
I guess I had some. I had Def Leppard, the whatever album that had Pour Some Sugar on Me. I had that album. I had the Whitesnake album. So I guess I had some. But like I grew up in a community that was like all about hair metal.
Yeah.
It was either country music or hair metal. That's what you were into if you were in like high school at my school.
I mean, certainly a lot of kids where I grew up were into it too. I was not into it. I was sort of scared of these guys and these things. I appreciate it now, of course. But
Twisted Sister, Dee Snider
he scared me.
We're Not Gonna Take It video is one of the most frightening looking things you could ever see.
Definitely. And Guns N' Roses just seemed really dangerous and like kind of bad guys or whatever.
Well,
but I mean,
they were really dangerous. There was nothing seems about it.
I guess my instincts were correct. But I mean, of course, I certainly appreciate this stuff now. Irish rock band U2 released their 5th studio album, The Joshua Tree, in March. That's a great album. The album featured hits like With or Without You, I Still Haven't Found What I'm Looking For, and Where the Streets Have No Name. I wonder if this is, I mean, they're so big and there's so many songs they're really well known for. I wonder if this is what they're the most well known for still or not. I mean, these are such big songs.
It's hard to say because, they've gone on to be so big. Certainly it was their big U.S. breakthrough.
Oh yeah. I mean
that With or Without You especially was like absolutely inescapable that year. I mean,
for
it was
sure. Yeah.
I grew up in the country. We didn't have cable, and the only way I could see music videos was Friday night videos.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
A TV show that aired on, I think it was NBC at like 10:30 at night every Friday night. And With or Without You, they played it like every week for like a year. I hated it by the time. I mean, I hated it probably pretty early on. I thought it was kind of sappy. I since love it now, but I think as a tween boy or a pre-tween boy, I was like, what is this?
Well, as a girl who loved romance and still does, I was always a fan of With or Without You. And and all of the songs on, I didn't have it at the time, but later when I got a CD player, I did own The Joshua Tree on CD. So, and finally, the family sitcom Full House premiered in September. Becoming one of the most beloved sitcoms well into the 90s. I always think of that as a 90s show. I don't think of it as 80s really at all.
Yeah. We've said this before. I think we were talking about, were you and I just talking about Alf on this show, or were we talking about Alf off?
We did talk about it. I don't remember where we talked about it.
We had some discussion of Alf.
I don't know if it was on the show or not.
It
was on the show. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But, some of these shows, like, I look at them now, you try to watch an episode, and it's like, what on earth? Was I brain dead? Like, what was wrong with me?
I mean, I did love it. And people, to be fair, they did reboot. They didn't reboot Alf, but they rebooted Full House for sure. And people seemed to take to it.
Yeah,
it was pretty big on Netflix.
I watched like 10 minutes of Fuller House, and it's still terrible. It's every bit as bad as the original Full House.
I mean, I think you have to just like that aesthetic and ethos, if I can use the word ethos in reference to Full House in order to, but it was big. I loved it. I watched it it was on TGIF, or at least it was eventually. I don't know if it was in 87.
Yeah.
But yeah.
All right. I'll take us through some movie news real quick, since we are a movie podcast. So there's a film that premiered at the School of the Art Institute in Chicago this year, called The Cure for Insomnia, which is according to the Guinness Book of World Records, is the longest film ever made. Wow. It runs 87 hours.
Oh my gosh.
The film has no plot. It largely consists of the maker of the film, artist L.D. Groban, reading his 4,000-page poem, which is also called A Cure for Insomnia. It takes him over 3.5 days to read it. It's occasionally spliced with clips of heavy metal and porn. I think it was maybe the only time that it was ever screened in its entirety was this screening in Chicago. It was never put out on any kind of home video format, and it's actually believed now that all the copies of it are lost.
Wow.
I can't remember how long it is, but I know that Andy Warhol made a movie, I think it's called Empire, that's like insanely long, and it's just a shot of the Empire State Building, and it just goes on for like forever. And I thought it was somewhere near that long, but 87 hours is a long one. Although I feel like I've seen movies that have felt like 87 hours.
Well, there is that.
Yeah. So the first Star Wars convention was held that year to celebrate the at that time 10-year anniversary of the franchise. So of course that's gone on to become quite a thing. The James Bond franchise was 25 years old that year, and celebrated it by releasing its 15th film, which was The Living Daylights, which was the first Timothy Dalton movie. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs was 50 years old that year, and so they re-released that year. And Paramount Pictures released its new on-screen logo to celebrate its 75th anniversary. And I believe this is the one you see where the stars come flying in, and then they dip into the lake that's in front of the mountain, and then they fly up and kind of semicircle over the mountain.
Yeah, I'm very used to that one.
Yeah,
for sure. Huh? Lots of anniversaries.
Yeah, a lot of anniversaries that year. All right, so let's get into first half of 87 by talking first about what we thought were some of the key films of that year. So here's how I broke that down, looking at what there was. Okay. I found I thought key franchise movies.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Movies from major directors, which I think we talked about in the last episode. This is our last year, 86. This is another year where some big time directors put out big movies. And then some flops. Some of the most famous flops in all of the 80s cinema happened in the first half of 87. So where do you think we should start?
Oh, you might as well start from the top of what I don't remember the first one you said, but we may as well go from the top.
The first, the one I said like 30 seconds ago.
Yeah. That's where my brain's at right now.
Well, I suggested franchises first.
Yeah, let's do franchises. Those are big in the 80s. Those are worth mentioning.
So Beverly Hills Cop 2 came out and proved that could be a franchise with legs. Of course, that didn't really last because Beverly Hills Cop 3 was considered a failure. But Beverly Hills Cop 2 was a big hit. Tony Scott directed it instead of Martin Brest, and it feels like a Tony Scott movie. It's it's kind of more action centered than the first film. Not that there isn't a ton of comedy in it, which there is, but it's definitely more of it feels like a Tony Scott movie. It's very glossy. It cuts very fast. It feels like a music video. Mm-hmm. It's the one with Brigitte Nielsen.
Oh, yeah.
As like a jewel thief.
Right. There's some kind of crazy scenes. Well, she's always wacky.
It's nowhere near as good as the first one, but it's still quite fun.
Of course, yeah.
A couple of big franchises started this year. Lethal Weapon, the
Huge.
Richard Donner, Shane Black movie that it didn't start the buddy cop formula that was a thing before Lethal Weapon, but it certainly took it to another level, and it's probably mostly responsible for the 12 million buddy cop movies that came after it, because it was a big deal and a big hit.
And it was part of that, I don't know that, well, I guess Beverly Hills Cop kind of did it before, but that melding of action and comedy, which was so huge in the 80s, it was a big part of that too, no?
Yeah.
Lethal Weapon.
Yeah. I love Lethal Weapon. I love the original. I'm not as big a fan of the sequels, even though those were also huge hits, because I think what made Lethal Weapon kind of really fascinating to me was it's there in the title when they call Mel Gibson's character Martin Riggs a lethal weapon. It's because he's suicidal,
right?
And he spends the whole movie doing stuff because he doesn't care if he's going to be killed,
right?
And
I kind of
in all the
that.
sequels, which are more family oriented, kind of precursors of like what the Fast and the Furious franchise ultimately tried to do. They kept expanding the family in that movie. And I think at the end of Lethal Weapon 4, like the last thing you see in that movie is all of the characters going, "We're a family," and they say it together. Yeah, it's very.
I don't think I've seen that one. Yeah.
But it really the sequels lose the edge. What I really like about that movie is the edge it has, and that edge of having a character, a suicidal cop, which I just haven't seen, and I can't think of another movie off the top of my head with a cop who's specifically wants to die.
Yeah,
it's sort of interesting to see that.
Oh, definitely. He's a real interesting character in that movie. They both are.
Yeah,
it's really
just
great.
A great screenplay too by Shane Black, and an interesting outing for Richard Donner, who of course was a real kind of journeyman filmmaker who made movies in so many different genres and did them all well. Like Lady Hawk was a fantasy, Goonies was a kids movie, Superman is a superhero movie. He made comedies, he made horror films. He was just a really it's astoundingly adept at every genre he tackled.
Wow. I mean, because I don't make and teach films for a living, I don't often retain, or I didn't used to often retain, who the directors of movies were. So to hear the breadth of what Richard Donner has made, that's wow. Hats off. That's amazing.
Yeah, he was great.
Yeah.
He's missed for sure.
Yeah.
Predator was another franchise that started this year.
Mm-hmm.
John McTiernan's thriller. McTiernan had a real amazing kind of run there in the late 80s and into 90 with Predator, Die Hard, and The Hunt for Red October.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Making three like kind of the all-time action classics of that of that era.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great director in that genre for sure. The original Predator is just it's just the biggest machismo fest. It's like it feels like the most masculine movie ever made in some ways.
Well, and speaking of Shane Black, he's involved
and he's
in
it.
Yeah,
he's an actor in it. I think he was brought down there to doctor the script,
to punch
and
it
then
up or something.
I don't know if he negotiated to be in it in exchange for that, or if, I'm not sure how it worked exactly. But I know he was down there to write as well.
Right. Yeah.
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 But yeah, it's a great movie. It's a movie that as a kid I watched 100 million times, just over and over again. Not that there's much dialogue, but I could recite Predator probably.
This is one of those I saw much later because it didn't seem like a movie for me back then. However, it is great, and I would like to see it again. I think I've only really seen it once. I should see it again.
Yeah,
it's great. It yeah, I mean, I'm into it now.
Yeah.
So
all those governors. It's got a bunch of governors.
Right. It does.
Evil Dead 2.
Oh, yeah.
Came out around this time. Sam Raimi's sequel to his original Evil Dead, a movie that The original Evil Dead is pretty much a straight horror film with just a tiny bit of comedy in it, and Evil Dead 2 goes full Looney Tunes.
I think this is what people probably think of when they think of the Evil Dead aesthetic, and
it feels
whatnot.
like feels like a Three Stooges movie almost, and it's
that's true, or Looney Tunes, as you say.
It's just the thing that I always not always, but the thing that as I've seen it a few times that I come away from it being kind of really admiring is Bruce Campbell's skill as a physical comedian.
Yeah.
The stuff he does in that movie is really wild. I mean, it's a great comedic performance.
Yeah. I think he's what I think of when I think of that sort of Evil Dead franchisee Army of Darkness stuff. So yeah, for sure.
It's amazing for such a no budget, kind of made in somebody's backyard movie for the life that franchise has had, spinning off comics and television series and reboots and remakes and sequels, and it just you can't kill it.
Good one.
And then Ernest Goes to Camp came out this time too, and it was the first Ernest movie. Yeah,
that was a really big 80s
first
franchise.
Of what ended
actually.
up being many Ernest movies.
Easily forgotten, I think, but a big franchise.
Yeah, and probably, maybe justifiably forgotten. Although I have a soft spot in my heart for Ernest Saves Christmas,
you showed that to
which
me
I
recently,
think is hilarious.
And I enjoyed it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's dumb and it's not good, but I as a little kid I loved it. So what can I say?
That's okay.
We could talk big directors.
Yeah, let's talk big directors.
Full Metal Jacket.
Yeah.
Stanley Kubrick's war epic. Have you seen Full Metal Jacket?
I haven't seen it. It's just one of those things I never, I was obviously way too young for it at the time and just didn't come back around to. Is this something I should see?
It is. It's not an easy watch, but it's interesting because...
is it Vietnam or is it? Yeah.
What's sort of fascinating about it is more so than almost any other movie you can think of, it's absolutely two separate films wedged into one movie.
That's interesting.
It's like 2 1-hour movies.
Wow.
And the first hour is boot camp.
Oh, wow.
And the second hour is the guys that you met in boot camp out in the field.
Yeah, that sounds fascinating, actually.
And the thing about it that's that I think everybody generally acknowledges it, even people that love it, is that the first half is just so much better than the second half. The second half feels a little more listless and unfocused, but the first half is just one of the best hours of film from the 80s period. I mean, it's grueling and dramatic and great, but it'll stick with you for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those movies that I remember being around. I remember it being a big deal. It's the one memory I have of Full Metal Jacket is being at a sleepover with a bunch of girlfriends, and I think the parents or somebody's parents had brought like the son or the brother of the girl whose sleepover it was out to see Full Metal Jacket. He was like an older, like young teen. So when I saw this like young, older male teen coming back from the movie, I was like, yeah, that's not a movie for me. I don't know. I just had this weird...
I thought you were about to say you were at a sleepover of
a
bunch of girls
Full Metal
and
Jacket.
you had Full Metal Jacket.
No. That
really
would have been
strange.
something. Well, I said I didn't see it, so no. I just remember it seeming like an older boy's movie. Hey guys, do you want to
watch Full Metal Jacket? Sure. Let's do it. Let's braid each other's hair and have a pillow fight and watch Full Metal Jacket.
No.
The Untouchables came out as your phenomenal movie. Brian De Palma working with a big budget for one of the first times, and with a script by David Mamet and a killer cast.
Yeah.
Costner and Connery, Andy Garcia in an early part, and De Niro putting on a bunch of weight to play Capone. Yeah, just a great, like, big Ennio Morricone score, like beautiful cinematography. They spent a ton of cash on the period details of it. Just a beautiful looking movie. It retains just enough of the like De Palma touches. Has that famous Odessa Steps sequence.
Yep.
With the little kid going down the steps in the pram,
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Just a great great movie about which, everybody's seen, so we probably don't need to say too much about it.
Although I will say I need to see it again. I think I've only seen it once and really loved it, but I don't remember it enough. I really should see that one again.
It's one of my favorites.
Yeah, it's so good.
The Witches of Eastwick, which was by the Australian filmmaker George Miller, who's most famous for the Mad Max series.
Yeah.
It's a comedy.
Him. Wow.
I remember liking it at the time, but I tried to watch it recently, and it's not very good. It didn't hold up. It was just, it felt like really indulgent and kind of dumb. And,
it's based on some pretty good source material. I think, isn't it? I forget. There's some really famous writer who wrote the short story or novel it's based on, but I don't remember who it is now. But George Miller's in it. I didn't realize he directed that. That's so interesting.
Yeah. It just feels like Jack Nicholson kind of farting around for 2 hours and making stuff up. I don't know. It just I didn't find it amusing, but I liked it when I was young, so I don't know. Maybe I watched it in the wrong mood. It was a hit. It was a big deal at the time. Raising Arizona, which was the second movie by the Coen brothers, but probably the big breakthrough. I don't think Blood Simple got great reviews, but was not a hit in any kind of conventional sense. But Raising Arizona really got people's
I think a lot of
attention.
People saw it.
It's actually one of my least favorite Coen Brothers movies. I don't know. What do you think?
I'd probably
like
agree.
It's like a live action Looney Tunes cartoon, right?
Yeah,
it's essentially a live action Bugs Bunny cartoon.
Which is another weird sort of subtext for this year, it sounds like. There are a few of these sort of Looney Tune-ish movies. Yeah, that's kind of what I remember. It's also not one of my favorite Coen brothers. It doesn't even, I don't think I know it's a Coen brothers movie, but I don't think Coen brothers when I think of it.
Yeah, I know there are people listening to this going, blasphemy, because
it's great.
It is
Don't get me
absolutely
wrong.
beloved. Yeah, I wouldn't say it's not
Certainly.
great. It is a great movie, but I just, they've done so much. It would not be in like even probably the top half of my sort of favorite Coen brothers movies.
Yeah.
And then finally, Mel Brooks' Spaceballs.
Yeah.
I mean, this is kind of Mel Brooks. This is not Mel Brooks at the peak of his powers. Like Mel Brooks was definitely a 70s filmmaker. He kept making movies well into the 90s to diminishing returns at the box office and really ultimately diminishing returns creatively too. Spaceballs might be his last really great movie.
It's quotable. It's it's
although there are people that love Robin Hood Men in Tights.
Yeah.
I'm not one of them, but there are people that love it. But Spaceballs is undeniably hilarious.
Yeah, for sure. I
don't think it was a hit. I think it was kind of discovered on cable and video.
Oh, okay. I guess that makes sense. But, I remember us all going around quoting.
But I love Mel.
Yeah, I love Mel too, and it's got a lot of good Mel jokes in it. Satirizing Star Wars and whatnot. Love you, Mel. Yeah.
I don't know if is that a Gen X? Do you think young people today know Spaceballs?
That's a really good question. It's possible some millennials know it, just from like you're saying, home video and cable and stuff. I don't know. You guys tell us, listeners tell us if it goes beyond Gen X. It's one of those things I know, if you're within a certain age range, you can quote it. Yeah. Quote a few things from it. Yeah.
All right, should we talk flops?
Sure, let's talk flops.
I bet you haven't seen any of these because most people haven't.
I can recognize some of the flops because you hear about them, but I probably haven't seen them.
So obviously the most famous is Ishtar.
Yes, I've heard of that
which almost
one,
became like a word that became synonymous with like
turkey or flop.
It's another Ishtar, meaning it was going to be like a big budget, indulgent, boring flop.
Do people use that anymore?
I don't think so.
Because I knew it as that back then, but I hadn't.
I think it's another thing that like Gen X-ers will know what you're talking about, and anybody younger than us is going to be like, Ishtar, what's that?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And rightly so. It's bad. It's not the worst movie ever made. I've seen it. And there are people that even like it. I think maybe they're just always going to be contrarians. It's not like Heaven's Gate, where it's like Heaven's Gate is actually a good movie. Ishtar is not.
Well, to tell people what Ishtar is, because it wasn't what I thought it was when I finally found out what it was.
It's like Elaine May made it. Mike Nichols' partner, Elaine May. It's kind of a throwback to the On the Road, like the Bob Hope movies.
Bing Crosby movies.
Yeah, Bing Crosby and Bob Hope comedies of yesteryear. And It's Beatty and Hoffman.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's just really indulgent and kind of dull.
Is it a musical? Do they sing?
No,
because
I don't think so.
I actually don't know if they sing in those on the road movies, but they might. Fred Astaire,
yeah, they did. I don't think it stars. I don't think it's that literal.
No,
kind
it's
of a
just
remake. It's just kind
like,
of
a homage or whatever.
Yeah, it's bad. Leonard Part 6 was also absolutely notorious attention-getting bomb from this era, and that's a spoof of spy movies with Bill Cosby, kind of a James Bond thing.
Yeah, I definitely didn't see this either.
I saw it. The thing I don't remember anything about it other than it was like, I remember even as a kid being like, wow, that was really short. It was like, it's like an hour and 15 minutes long or something like that. I remember that's my one impression of it. It's like, why was that so short? Maybe because it was so horrible. They were like, we just gotta end it.
Wow. Yeah. I'm aware of it, but have not seen it.
Yeah. And finally, there was a movie called $1 Million Mystery. Are you aware of this movie?
I've heard the title. I don't know why, but other than the title, I have heard nothing about it.
Okay, so there's a great story behind this movie. So $1 Million Mystery is a comedy that was released as a promotional tie-in with Glad trash bags.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
It was the final feature film directed by Richard Fleischer, who was a kind of a great old school English director. Had a big ensemble cast of kind of comedians from the era. It was meant to sort of evoke like, it's a mad world. Like those kinds of like, those movies where you would have like 20 or Cannonball Run.
Right. Like
those kinds of movies where you'd have a ton of actors and they would all be in really small parts and they would be racing or something.
Cameo almost thing. Yeah.
So the premise, I'm trying to remember. I saw it like back in the day. I didn't see it in the theater or anything, but I remember seeing it on TV. It was horrible. It's like a guy is dying and he says that he's hidden $1 million somewhere and all these comedians go on the run looking for it. The thing that was unique about it is that it was through this like Glad trash bag promotion. It was also a contest. It was kind of a sweepstakes. And you would get entry forms when you went to the movie where you would watch the movie and you would look for clues in the movie to tell you where the $1 million was actually hidden somewhere in America. And if you could identify correctly where the $1 million was hidden, then you win it. So it was a chance to go to a movie and potentially win $1 million.
Did anybody win? Do you know?
Yes. A ton of people did. A ton of people identified correctly where the $1 million was. I don't think it was actually all that hard.
Okay. Yeah.
And so they had to hold a
drawing or something.
Yeah, a drawing, kind of a lottery for it. And the winner ended up being a 14-year-old girl from Bakersfield, California.
Oh, wow.
The money was hidden in the bridge of the nose of the Statue of Liberty.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. They let them put $1 million in the Statue of Liberty?
So it says.
Oh, or maybe that's just where they said, I see.
Yeah, I don't know.
That was a bit naive on my part. It's probably just where they said
maybe it was actually there.
I don't think it was there. Yeah,
I couldn't tell you. I don't know that. I just know the basic kind of outline of the story of this.
Although if I'm remembering correctly, I think back then the Statue of Liberty wasn't open to the public. They were refurbishing it. So
possibly, but why would they in that case?
No, right. It would just be, I don't know what
But anyway, thousands of people got it right. So they had to have a big drawing. But yeah, the movie itself was a giant flop. Like few people saw it. So
I mean, God bless the 80s. A tie-in with Glad trash bags.
Isn't that weird?
Amazing. That's so weird.
The sad part, we might have talked about this in a previous episode. The stuntman Dar Robinson is one of the all-time great stuntmen. This is the movie that he died making in a motorcycle accident. He went off a cliff on a motorcycle trying to do a stunt.
Wow.
Yeah, of all the things not that any movie is ever worth dying for, but $1 Million Mystery is definitely not.
Yeah, that's too bad.
I had a couple more key films, a couple indie movies that were kind of important from this era. River's Edge.
Yeah. I haven't seen that, but I know it's key. It's definitely one of those.
It's a dark drama about a group of teenagers that one of their group kills another one of their group, and they kind of decide not to report it. This is my memory. I haven't seen it in a long time.
Yeah.
Very, very dark. Probably mostly remembered today because it had all of these kind of Keanu Reeves. It's an early Keanu Reeves
movie. Isn't Ione Skye in it too? It's like
Ione Skye, yeah. Crispin Glover.
Right.
Dennis Hopper.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Quite a cast.
And Hollywood Shuffle, which is a movie I absolutely love.
It's an amazing movie with an amazing story.
Out at this at this time. That's Robert Townsend's first movie, launched his career. He made it on his credit cards.
Yeah.
Famously. It's one of the pre like Kevin Smith, he was one of the first guys that was like, I can't get anyone to finance a movie I would want to make.
Yeah.
And I'm tired as a black actor of being cast as like, these horrible parts as criminals. Stereotypical parts. Yeah. And so I'm going to get my friends together and we're going to make our own movie. And it was an era. It wasn't, you couldn't make a movie on your phone. You couldn't even shoot a movie on video.
You had to get
really.
Actual film.
You had to get the cash to make the movie on film and then try to find some apparatus through which to find distribution. It was just a Herculean effort on his part, and amazing that he did it. And not only amazing that he did it, but that he made such an incredibly wonderful movie.
Great.
If you've never seen it, I highly recommend it. It's a very small film, but it's very, very, very funny.
It is. It's in the Criterion Collection, I believe.
It is, yeah.
It's wonderful. He's just great. I love Robert Townsend.
Yeah, it justifiably launched his career.
Yeah.
Eddie Murphy saw it and then hired him to direct Raw.
Is that right? I didn't know that. Yeah.
And he got a TV show a few years later. He made some other movies, The Meteor Man and The Five Heartbeats.
Yeah. He was in Streets of Fire.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's so great.
And the last movie I would mention, I couldn't figure out where else to put this. So it's so 80s that it has to be mentioned. It's one of those movies that if you wanted to explain the 80s to an alien landing on the planet, why you would want to do that, I don't know. But if you had to, you would show them The Secret of My Success.
I knew you were going to say
with
that.
Michael J. Fox.
Yep, it's so much of the 80s in that movie.
Oh my God, yeah.
That I have another sleepover story. It's not much of a sleepover story, but we did watch that at a sleepover at my house.
Well,
which
lay it on us.
I mean, that's the story.
That's the story. Oh.
Well, except that I
thought we were going to do a crossover episode with Lisa's Sleepover Stories podcast.
I mean, there's not much of stories there, but I will say, even at the time, I thought, whoa, this is a little adult, maybe. Like it's a little like there's some adult themes in there.
Oh yeah,
maybe some like 9 to 10-year-old girls.
Oh no, it's full of double entendres and innuendos, and it's
a little adult.
Yeah,
but.
It's cute. It's fun. It's lightweight. It's a screwball comedy. Michael J. Fox is great in it.
It's Wall really Street light, very much so.
Yeah, it's the comedy version of Wall Street. Yeah,
to some degree. Yeah, Helen Slater is in it too, I think.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean it's about a guy who I think comes from it's Michael J. Fox coming from the Midwest. Is that right?
I think Iowa, in fact.
Is it Iowa?
Yeah.
And he's coming to sort of make his fortune on Wall Street, if I'm remembering right.
Yep.
And he ends up like in the mailroom of some big firm and commandeers an office.
And masquerades as a high-powered executive, essentially. Yeah.
Yeah. And Helen Slater gets in on it in some way. I forget how.
Yeah, she's the love interest.
Well, she's the love interest, but she also gets in on their scheme.
Their charade,
Yeah, I forget what they do, but.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
It is fun.
All right, what about unsung gems?
I don't know if these are really unsung, but I feel like they need to be mentioned.
Yeah, I don't know how many of mine are either, but there may be movies that I guess one of my hopes is that maybe some of the people listening to this are not Gen Xers.
Right.
I mean, I'm happy to shout out to all our Gen X listeners who are celebrating our childhood and our era.
We're here for you.
Film
Absolutely.
history. But maybe if some millennials or Gen Zers or whatever the heck comes after them is listening, we can recommend some movies that would maybe be a little more off their radar.
Yeah.
So that's the idea. It's not, these movies aren't necessarily forgotten or got no attention, but that they
might not have
that they
heard
could
of.
use a little love in the present day.
I mean, well, I don't know what you have. I had these under key films because they were films I'd actually seen and that were key for me, but not probably not. Although, I mean, they're very 80s.
All right, tell us about them.
Well, there's Outrageous Fortune, which is a Touchstone film, and those were, it's a Bette Midler, Shelley Long movie. And, right? I hope I have the right one.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
action comedy.
Yeah,
very funny. George Carlin.
Female fronted.
Yep.
Very 80s because it was Touchstone, and Touchstone was very 80s.
Yep.
So,
zippy, fast moving action comedy for sure.
Yeah.
And
really
those
fun.
two at the kind of peak of their powers. Yeah.
Funny ladies. So that's one I had. What's one that you had?
Some Kind of Wonderful, which is, I think, considered kind of a lesser John Hughes and is rightfully considered kind of a remake of Pretty in Pink, which came out a year earlier, kind of a gender flip version of that. And that's all true, but it's also just like, lesser John Hughes is still better than 99% of everything that's made, and it's totally worth seeing. It's a great...
The sad
Maybe
thing
not
about
great,
this
but
is
it's a really fun, very lovely movie.
I've really only seen parts of this. I really ought to see the whole thing.
Oh, really? Yeah, it's great. Great soundtrack, as every Hughes movie had in that era.
Yeah.
And I think it might be the last Hughes teen movie.
Is that right?
Because he, shortly after this, he went into like Home Alone and Baby's Day Out.
Oh.
And I mean, he did, as we'll talk in the next episode, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles.
Yeah.
But this was sort of like, this was the tail end of the teen run.
I see,
right?
the teen
16
period,
Candles,
so to speak.
Candles.
Yeah.
16 Candles, Breakfast Club, Pretty in Pink, Ferris Bueller, Weird Science, and this.
I mean, quite a run.
Yeah.
I remember thinking Mary Stuart Masterson as a drummer was kind of cool.
Yeah.
But I really should see the whole thing. I've never seen the whole thing.
What else you got?
I also had Mannequin, which is, I don't know, where do you put that?
I had that
movie?
down in So Bad It's Good.
Okay, I wasn't sure if that was a So Bad It's Good.
I mean, I love Mannequin, but it is...
Yeah, it's a little...
It's terrible.
Okay, so
it's
maybe
not a good movie, but it's super fun.
It is really fun.
Yeah, and very 80s. You might put that 80s. One on the list for The Alien as well.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a love story set in a department store. I mean, it's just very...
Yeah, it's very broad.
80s.
It's... Yeah.
Yeah.
It's fun.
It's dopey as any movie you'll ever see, but it's undeniably fun and spirited and great soundtrack, and
Yeah, I mean, that's probably true. It's a So Bad It's Good movie, but we watch it a lot. It's just a movie
it's
that
eye
we
candy.
like. Yeah. It's really fun. I also had Project X. What do you think about Project X?
I love Project X.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's Matthew Broderick as a pilot who goes to work at this kind of experimental program where they're, he thinks they're testing like software and sort of flight simulators using chimps. And it turns out that he uncovers a conspiracy that they're actually testing radiation to see how pilots will react once they're exposed to radiation. And so they're essentially killing the monkeys.
It's kind of heartbreaking.
And so he teams up with Helen Hunt to save them. And it's a very fun, charming movie.
I forget the name of the monkey. He becomes like really good. He has a good relationship with one
Cecil
of the
or something like that.
I don't remember. But it's heartbreaking, but also really sweet. And
it's cute, yeah. Spoiler, it has a happy ending. The monkeys get away.
Yeah, it's okay. So like, don't be scared. But it is hard to watch the parts where the monkeys are sad.
Nobody likes a sad monkey.
No. This is one I haven't seen, but maybe you want to talk about it. Cherry 2000.
Yeah, I had that down in B movies. That's our friend Steve DeJarnette, the maker of Miracle Mile.
Yep.
It's his follow-up movie. It's a kind of post-apocalyptic sci-fi action comedy thing. A very good Melanie Griffith. It's fun. It's kind of goofy and all over the place and kind of anarchic and fun. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I just haven't seen it, but I know our friend Steve DeJarnette made it, and it's worth mentioning. What else do you have?
Under Unsung Gems, I have a few more. Roxanne.
Oh, yeah. That's another
Steve
one I haven't
Martin's Cyrano de Bergerac remake. Mm-hmm. Really charming movie. Daryl Hannah is the woman he's after. Just lovely, proof that Steve Martin is just a great writer on top of being a great comedian. Mm-hmm. Tin Men, which is Tin, right. Tin Men, right. Which is a Barry Levinson comedy set in Baltimore, of course, with set in, I think it's the 60s. It's Richard Dreyfuss and Danny DeVito as rival aluminum siding salesmen who run afoul of each other and spend the whole movie trying to sabotage and get revenge on each other.
Gosh,
it's very funny.
I've never seen that.
It's pretty charming.
Yeah.
And Radio Days, which is Woody Allen's movie about his childhood, which is very sort of nostalgic and very cute. And then I had a trio of, I think, under the radar thrillers from this era. Yep. One is called Extreme Prejudice, which is a Walter Hill action thriller set on the border with Mexico with Nick Nolte and Powers Booth and Michael Ironside. It's like a seminar of tough guys.
Heavens.
Yeah, kind of a modern Western centered around border security.
Wow.
Street Smart, which was a Canon Films thriller. Okay. This is the movie that Christopher Reeve made part of his contingency for his doing Superman 4. For Canon. They had to fund this passion project of his, which was this movie. It's a really good movie. More people should see this movie.
I have not seen this movie.
Yeah, it's directed by a great 70s filmmaker named Jerry Schatzberg, who made Panic in Needle Park with Al Pacino. It's a cool thriller. Here's the premise. It's Christopher Reeve plays a journalist at kind of like a New York Magazine type of thing. And he's under a deadline to deliver something, and he pitches a story that he's going to get an interview, the first ever interview with a real New York pimp, and figure out, like, here's what their life is like. Whoa. Here's the stresses. Here's what they deal with. And he goes around and he tries to get pimps to talk to him, and nobody will talk to him. I mean, he looks like the whitest, squarest guy
Superman.
ever. He looks
it's
like
Clark
Christopher
Kent
Reeve.
going around and training. Yeah, that's
and
wild.
So he's hitting this deadline, and he decides to fabricate the story. So he makes up the pimp and creates the story.
Whoa.
Morgan Freeman, and this is his breakthrough movie, plays Fast Black, who is a really scary pimp who reads the story and believes it's about him. And believes that Christopher Reeve has figured out who he is and is somehow spying on him through his stable of girls.
So he's
Kathy
just
Baker
made something up that turns out to be too close to reality.
Makes turns out to be too close, and so Fast Black abducts him, and they end up getting into this like cat and mouse game.
Oh my gosh. And
the way Christopher Reeve gets out of it at the end is pretty ingenious.
That sounds intense.
Yeah, it's a good movie. It's if it's remembered at all today, it's for Morgan Freeman, who I think was nominated for an Oscar for it. Wow. He's really, really scary. It's one of the great villain performances of the 80s.
Wow.
And then finally, a really great film noir called Angel Heart.
Oh, yeah.
Which is Alan Parker, a great English filmmaker who made another guy who, like Richard Donner, worked in a million different genres. He made Fame and Angela's Ashes and Mississippi Burning.
They're very different movies.
Yeah, a lot of different. And this was his kind of horror film / film noir with Mickey Rourke as a gumshoe looking for an old crooner from the 40s who is believed to have sold his soul to Satan in order to get his success.
I see.
And he ends up going down to New Orleans and stumbling into the world of kind of voodoo. Yeah. And it's very scary, very stylish, very beautiful, like beautifully shot.
Yeah. I remember
Lisa Bonet.
Lisa Bonet is in it. Yeah.
It's probably best remembered for some pretty insane sex scenes between Mickey Rourke and Lisa Bonet. Yeah. And at a time when she was still doing the Cosby Show.
Yeah, yeah.
As Denise Huxtable.
Yeah.
That was what all the press was about.
Right.
But it's actually a really, really, really good movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I saw it, and I also really liked it. I mean, I've seen it more recently, not when I was 9, but yeah.
So how about B movies or so bad it's good? Did you have anything from these categories? These are usually not big categories for you, but I always have a ton.
I mean, yeah, I think you're going to have more to say about them than I will. But I mean, we got to talk about Over the Top.
Yeah.
I think Over the Top was probably the biggest one for me in this category. Yeah.
So yeah. It's the Cannon Films arm wrestling opus.
Yep. It's an arm wrestling film with Sylvester Stallone.
Yeah. So the backstory of this, I mean, there's not a ton, but this was Cannon Films when they were, we'll talk more about this in the next episode because this was the year that Cannon Films, who we've talked about before. If you don't remember, Cannon Films is 2 guys, Menachem Golan and Yoram Globus. They're cousins from Israel. Mm-hmm. And they came over and started this kind of miniature studio that worked primarily in genre films. They made all the big Chuck Norris and Charles Bronson movies from that era, and they were extremely profitable. And they released just exponentially more movies in a year than any other studio. Like most studios would put out like maybe 10 movies tops in a year, and Cannon was putting out 10 movies a month. And most of them were not good, but some of them were great. And they were distinctive, and they kind of developed an identity for themselves. And what happened in 87 is that they just got too big for their britches. They got ambitious to kind of compete more with like 20th Century Fox, Paramount, and Disney. And they wanted to be bigger and they kind of lost sight of
what made them successful.
Yeah, what made them successful. Their ambition got the best of them. And this really, it started with Over the Top and ended with 2 movies that we'll talk about in the next episode that came out in the back half of 87. But Over the Top was, the problem with Over the Top was the Stallone salary. They wanted to work with a movie star, a bigger movie star than they were used to working with. They wanted Stallone. He saw the script. He said, no way, this is horrible. And they raised his salary, and he said, no, I'm not going to do it. And this went back and forth forever. And finally it got to the point where Stallone couldn't say no.
It was just that
And I think
much.
his salary ended up being $15 million, which was a record at that point in 1987. It was the most money any actor had ever been paid for a movie. It's of course been long since eclipsed, but it was just an obscene amount of money.
I mean, that's 1987 money.
Yeah,
too,
it's $50 million in 1987 money. Yeah, whatever that would be.
Yeah.
Stallone eventually did it. I think he rewrote the script, and which is probably good because he's a great writer.
Yep.
I love it. It's a fun
I actually
movie.
really like
it's
it too.
It's super dumb.
It's
if you don't know anything about it, you probably only know it as the dumb looking arm wrestling movie. It actually has kind of a lovely little like father-son story.
Yeah, I mean, the most of the movie is him driving with his son, and he owns a trucking company, right? The Sylvester Stallone, and he's estranged from his son and picks his son up at his son is what, like 11, 12? Picks him up at his military academy and drives him across the country.
Yeah,
or
they
something.
hate each other at first, but then they love each other by the end.
because they're very different people. Yeah.
Why do you like it? I know why I like it. I was a little boy when this came out, and it's an arm wrestling action movie. But why do you? But you didn't even see it until a few years ago when I showed it to you.
I mean,
and you really dug it.
I did. I mean, I actually do think it's kind of sweet. I do like the Sylvester and his son kind of things. I don't know. I guess I mean, Sylvester Stallone is also kind of an appealing actor.
Yeah.
It's kind of
the
fun.
The soundtrack is really good.
The soundtrack's really
Great
good.
soundtrack.
Yeah. The whole...
Do you like the arm wrestling?
Actually, I mean, it's kind of wild. I've never before or since seen any other arm wrestling movie. So, it makes you wonder.
I don't think there is another arm wrestling
movie.
I
don't think there is. I mean, it makes you wonder, is this like a real thing? And I think you found out recently that it is a real thing.
Yeah. I went on YouTube. It turns out there's a whole world there's like a whole community of arm wrestling, which of course there is. But like, it's one of those things that you don't think about.
Yeah, no.
It's like shown on ESPN 8, the Ocho, in the middle of the night.
I mean, I guess I just think it's like quirky and sweet, and I kind of like it for that. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know how to
Did you have any others from either B movies or So Bad It's Good movies?
Not really. Nothing that I've seen. I mean, some stuff, popped out at me, but I couldn't speak to any of them. One I'll mention, I don't think it's probably even good. But it just said 80s to me. Harry and the Hendersons. It's a movie I have not seen, but it's like one of those only in the 80s kind of movies, I think.
It's really bad.
I'm sure it's really bad.
It's John Lithgow is the dad,
oh my
though.
God,
can you imagine?
That's right. Oh, dear.
In fact, the Harry is played by the same guy that played the Predator.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Big year for him. Well, good for him.
Kevin Peter Hall, I think was his name.
Just a really
he passed away. Super tall guy.
Yeah.
He was on, the only time I saw him in anything where he wasn't wearing some kind of creature costume was a show called Misfits of Science.
Oh,
do you remember the show with Courtney Cox?
I didn't see it, but yeah.
They were like genius teenagers.
Okay.
Oh, no, they weren't. They were, I'm thinking of Whiz Kids.
Oh.
Misfits of Science, they were superheroes, essentially.
Oh, were they really?
Yeah.
Oh, I've never
and Kevin
seen
Peter Hall, who was like a 7-foot tall actor, of course, his superpower was that he could shrink down to like the size of an inch. So he could like sneak under door frames and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this was a movie about like a normal family adopting Sasquatch, essentially, right? I think. I mean, I don't even. Again, I've never seen
only
it.
in the 80s.
Yeah,
right?
It just feels like an only in the 80s movie
It
that
does.
ought to be mentioned, but you don't need to see it.
You want to know something great about the Morrows?
Yeah, let's hear it.
I saw that in the theater.
Nice.
Yeah,
well, that's
we went
because
to
you
the theater
all
to see
always
that.
went to see everything.
Yeah, that's true.
So,
We saw everything.
We went to see nothing. So, yeah. It's there's probably some more that you have in here that are probably.
I'm going to run through a few real quick.
Yeah, let's hear it.
We're long enough that I'm going to be super fast as I burn through these. But so a few other good B movies: The Bedroom Window, which is an early Curtis Hanson film noir with Steve Guttenberg.
Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of dopey in the third act, but it's very Hitchcock derivative. It's like Hitchcock light.
Okay.
The Stepfather. Which is actually a really great horror movie, independent horror movie, and very well regarded. It's Terry O'Quinn, who played Locke on Lost, as a guy who wants his family to be perfect so badly that he's willing to murder to do it and go be unhinged. It's actually a really good movie.
Yeah, it is good.
The director of that movie went on to make some really great. He made The Good Son. He made Sleeping with the Enemy.
Oh, so this is kind of
he's a good thriller director.
Yeah.
The Gate, which is a movie about a bunch of kids who accidentally open a portal to hell in their backyard.
It's also very 80s.
Yes, very 80s. It's a lot of fun. It stars Stephen Dorff when he was like 12.
Oh, wow.
It's like a prepubescent Stephen Dorff.
Yeah.
The Believers, which is a thriller about Martin Sheen, who is investigating a cult in New York of Satan worshippers who end up kidnapping his son.
Oh boy.
I know.
Yeah.
This was a fear of every parent in the 80s.
Well, it was
the satanic panic.
Yeah, it was a complete hoax, but it was an actual fear of parents in the 80s.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then finally Dead of Winter, which is another very Hitchcockian thriller with Mary Steenburgen as an actress who goes out to audition for a part at a mansion out in like upstate New York or someplace.
Always a good idea.
Yeah, great idea. And ends up being, captured by these old guys who have nefarious ideas and
boy.
Yeah, it's based on a book from like the 40s. It's kind of a gothic horror. Feels like a kind of a Daphne du Maurier type of thing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then So Bad It's Good. Quickly. Creepshow 2, which is a terrible movie, but the middle segment, it's a 3-segment movie. The middle segment sticks with any kid that saw this from that era.
This is Stephen King, right?
Yeah.
Stephen King.
So the middle segment is about this kind of creature that looks like just a big flat oil slick.
Okay.
And these teenagers go swimming out to one of those docks that's out in the middle of the lake, kind of the freestanding dock, and they get stranded out there by this oil slick monster that wants to devour them. And eventually it starts to tear up the dock to get at them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It's not good, but it's just one of those weirdly haunting things that if you saw it as a little kid, you're like, oh, I'm not going to ever forget that.
Yeah.
The Barbarians, which is an Italian-made sword and sorcery Conan ripoff starring the Barbarian Brothers. Do you remember the Barbarian Brothers?
No. Who are they? I don't even know who they are.
They were these two like bodybuilder twin brothers.
Wow.
I think their last name was Paul.
So not Barbarian.
Yeah, their last name was Barbarian.
It was really Barbarian?
Well, I don't know if I doubt if that was the name they were born with.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Okay. Exactly. Yeah. Mm-hmm. They use that as like their stage name. I think that's even maybe how they're credited on this movie.
Okay.
But yeah, they had a few movies. They were like briefly a thing in kind of low budget, straight to video.
Okay.
You would see them at the video store on the covers of bad movie VHS.
Wow. Okay.
And The Barbarians is like their biggest movie. It's like 2 Conans in one movie. Yeah.
More for your money, I guess.
And then finally, Andy Sedaris' masterpiece, Hard Ticket to Hawaii.
Oh, yeah.
Andy Sedaris, for those of you that don't know, was a very prolific B-movie filmmaker who made a bunch of kind of bad Miami Vice, Magnum PI style cop action movies in Hawaii or in the Florida Keys, and they always starred a bunch of Penthouse Pets or Playboy Playmates.
I see. Yeah.
None of them could act, of course.
Well.
And these movies are so wildly inept. Like all the basic rules of just the basic filmmaking are out the window.
Of like storytelling, etc.
Continuity.
Forget it.
Character.
Forget it.
Yeah, it's but for some reason, like, and they're kind of like dirty old man movies because of course the women are only in these movies to lose their shirts. But there's something weirdly innocent about them because they just feel like a bunch of ding-dongs got together with a camera.
Let's make a movie.
Yeah, so there's something kind of innocent, weirdly innocent about them. Mm-hmm. But they were always on, I don't know if you remember this. You didn't have cable as a kid either.
No, yeah.
There used to be, when we were kids, Cinemax.
I was going to say,
Friday
I'm going to bet
nights.
it was on Cinemax.
Yeah, it was called like Friday After Dark or Cinemax After Dark, but the nickname, of course, was Skinemax.
I mean, I knew that much. Yeah.
Andy Sedaris movies were always playing in the Skinemax window, like Friday after 10 p.m.
Yeah.
Malibu Express. That was another. That was another great one. They're inept though. Like they're not like. It's not like Over the Top, which is a bad movie, but is well made.
Yes,
like it has good cinematography, music, and it's like adequately directed, even though it's bad. Yeah. Like these movies are like Ed Wood.
Yeah,
yeah.
Canon is not the same as Ed Wood by any.
No. Canon's movies are well made. They're just ill advised.
It's a different category entirely, for sure.
Okay, did you have any rewindable moments?
Oh yeah,
favorite scenes from these movies?
For sure.
Yeah, I had a bunch too.
I mean, we talked about the baby carriage on the stairs in The Untouchables, which is an amazing scene. I mean, there's a lot of quotable things in Spaceballs, like "May the Schwartz be with you," the merchandising portion, Pizza the Hut, Yogurt, who I think Mel plays. So that's all really fun. The leap in Outrageous Fortune, I think that's
at the end of Outrageous,
Shelley Long kind of leaps across a canyon.
Yeah.
They set that up at the beginning of the movie.
Using her skills as a ballet dancer to get away from the villain by leaping across the canyon. Yeah.
Yep. The mannequin, Do You Dream About Me? The try-on clothing montage.
Yes. The music montage.
Yes.
Every 80s movie had a great music montage, and Mannequins is one of the best.
I mean, honestly, if you don't want to watch Mannequin, just try to go find that montage. Yep. It's super fun. And their wedding in the store window with the Starship song in the background. What do you have?
The opening of Lethal Weapon, I love where the Jingle Bell Rock plays. And it kind of pulls into this. Well, there's that scene. That's the next scene.
Oh, okay.
I mean, the first 20 minutes of Lethal Weapon are just unbelievable.
Yeah.
But it starts with this very mysterious opening where this girl jumps to her death.
Oh, that's right. From a high rise. Yeah.
It's interesting. My favorite scene in The Untouchables is when they raid the distillery at the beginning.
Oh, I need to see this movie again. I just don't remember. It's
unbelievable. It's one of my favorite, like, kind of wide establishing shots that starts of this street in Chicago with all the cars, and it follows our 4 guys across the street, and they're right in the middle of the financial district. And Connery's like, "Well, here we go," and he's like handing out shotguns, and Kevin Costner's like, "Here?" And Connery's like, yeah, if you want to like, you have to go where it is. And it's right in the middle of like this business district.
Wow.
Capone has this distillery hidden. It's great.
Cool.
Connery walks in and hits this guy in the nuts with his shotgun and goes, how do you think he feels now? Better or worse?
Pure Connery.
Yeah. There's an incredible scene in Roxanne where Steve Martin's in this bar and he has this long nose, like the Cyrano legend. And some guy insults him and he's like, oh, is that the best you have? And he gets up and he turns this moment where he could have been humiliated and kind of emasculated in front of this girl he likes, Daryl Hannah's character. He turns it into this moment of triumph by going on a run of insults of himself.
Right.
Because he's grown up with this big nose, and so he's heard every insult in the business. And so the scene is amazing. It's just this long running monologue of him insulting himself to take away, to kind of turn the tables and end up humiliating the guy who was trying to humiliate him. Yeah. It's a really great scene.
Yeah. That's a movie. I can't believe I haven't seen that movie, but I really ought to. Yeah.
In Predator.
Oh, yeah.
When he hits that mudslide and he goes off the cliff and he lands in the mud and he climbs out of the water, he's covered in mud and the Predator follows him out and he realizes for the first time that the Predator has been tracking them using their body heat and that he can't see him
because he's
covered in mud. And you see, and it's also the first scene where the Predator takes his mask off and you see what he looks like.
Whoa. Yeah.
It's a really cool, kind of climactic moment. And it kicks off the third act, which is just Arnold versus the Predator.
Yeah. That's what you pay the money for.
Really any segment in Hollywood Shuffle.
Oh yeah.
Which is just such a funny movie.
Yeah.
It's so funny. It's very episodic. It's like a series of skits almost. It's almost kind of like a precursor to something like In Living Color. Yeah. Which is, Hollywood Shuffle was also made by Keenan Ivory Wayans. He's the big collaborator with Robert Townsend.
Yeah, it has some of that feel to it.
There's also a lovely scene in that movie where he goes and he visits his barber, who is also his uncle, who talks about his following his dream as a prize fighter. And it's just this lovely, tender, sincere scene, and it's evocative of what I love about that movie, which is that it's not just about all of these wacky sketches. There's like a real emotional undercurrent in that film, and it really is trying to say something. And it's actually really kind of moving, and you'll cry at the end of Hollywood Shuffle, and as you watch it, you wouldn't think that you would.
It's not what you'd expect. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's what as I've grown to know Robert Townsend more, that's kind of what I've loved about his movies. They really do have a lot of that kind of heart in them. Yeah. For sure.
And then finally, I just have to mention this. We haven't mentioned this movie at all.
Oh.
But, I mean, how can you not cite this scene?
Okay.
Silent Night, Deadly Night 2 came out.
Okay. I don't know this movie. I mean, I've heard of it, but...
Yes, well, you know this scene.
Oh,
you and I quote this all the time because I've shown it to I showed it to you on YouTube, which is how most people have probably seen it. Most people have probably not seen this movie, but they might know this scene because
I do know.
If you Google stuff like, or if you go on YouTube and punch in stuff like weirdest line of dialogue ever or weirdest line delivery ever or whatever, you'll get two results. One is Ryan O'Neal in the Norman Mailer film Tough Guys Don't Dance, there's a scene where he's on a beach and the camera zooms into him and he goes, oh man, oh God, oh man, oh God, oh man. He just keeps doing that. The other one is from Silent Night, Deadly Night 2, where our villain, who's like this young, clean-cut, blonde kid, pulls out a gun and just shoots some poor bastard who's hauling his trash out to the curb and goes, garbage day.
Yep.
Yeah. It is one of the weirdest moments in all of filmdom.
I think I only know the YouTube clip and therefore have not properly assigned it to Silent Night, Deadly Night 2. Which
there's no reason to see Silent Night, Deadly Night 2.
I don't think I'll ever see it. But good to know the proper citation, though.
Yeah, good to know the citation, yeah. That clip, on the other hand, could watch it till the end of time.
You should go watch the clip.
Yeah.
It's astonishing.
All right. Any final thoughts? I think we're ready to wrap up here.
Yeah, I think we're ready. Get ready for a big time.
Yeah, the second half of 87 is a beast.
Big.
A lot of great movies coming in this short period of time.
So prepare yourself.
Yeah. All right. We'll see you next time. Thanks for listening.
Thank you. You've been listening to The Long Rewind. The program is produced by Dustin Morrow and hosted by me, Lisa Molinelli. If you enjoy the show, please consider hitting the subscribe button, leave us a good review on your podcast app, and tell your friends about the program. We'll see you next time. Thanks for listening.